The signs of a new, more assertive atheism are hard to ignore. A global atheist convention opening in Australia this weekend has emboldened non-believers and convinced some believers that they're under fresh attack. The columnist Charles Moore wrote recently that religion had been pushed out of public life, while Peter Atkins, formerly professor in chemistry at Oxford University, has described religious teaching as purveying lies. So if this is a war, who's winning? When I brought the two together earlier, I started by asking Charles Moore if this new atheism is a more potent force.
I think that's right, and I think it's a bit odd that atheism should wish to turn itself into a religion. If I were an atheist, I don't think I would see the point in a global atheist convention.
What do you think lies behind this change?
One of the most justified criticisms of the church in history is its abuse of power. And I think that one of the things that's happening with atheists is that they now think they're going to get power. And they therefore, because this is what happens when people get power, are getting ready to abuse it. And so I think there's a sort of replication, a potential replication of the wrongs that the church has committed in the behaviour of powerful atheism. And I notice that in an attack on the rights of the religious, for example.
Peter, do you think there is a new movement of more aggressive atheism,
yes,
as Charles describes?
Absolutely, and so it should be. I mean, we have confidence, much more confidence now, in the roots of disbelief. And I really would dispute what Charles was saying, that, first of all, it's not a religion. It's a movement, certainly, but it's not a religion in the sense that we get down and pray to some non-god and so on. And also, it's not a denial of, not a statement of nothing. It's a statement saying, look, we have no evidence for the existence of a god. We'll only build God into the picture should the evidence prove it necessary. So we're starting at really a very fundamental barren rock sort of level to build on. We're not denying something, we're just starting from zero.
Can I ask you where this new confidence has come from?
Science.
From science?
Mostly. Science is answering all the great questions of being, which religion has singularly failed to answer for 3,000 or 4,000 years, despite its trying, whereas science is moving towards an understanding. And the glorious thing about science and its answers to the great questions is that the answers will be forthcoming on this side of the grave rather than the next.
Fair point. Science can give you answers more rapidly, develops more rapidly, and ultimately is more satisfying than religion, Charles.
Well, I think what Peter Atkins is saying is definitely a form of triumphalism, and therefore a heresy of science, just as triumphalism is a heresy of religion.
It's a triumph of the power of the collective human enterprise, and I think that's rather wonderful. Whereas religion is really a denial of the capacity of humans to understand.
Well, it's certainly not the case that religion is a denial of the human capacity to understand. The doctrine of the incarnation is about how God becomes man, therefore allowing man a unique understanding. But of course I wouldn't deny that science leads to greater understanding. I'd be the last person to oppose science. What I worry about the project that's being set out here is that it's extremely unaware how small a part in the whole of the history of the universe mankind has played, and extremely unaware of the provisional nature of all our knowledge. The idea that we are just sort of over the hill from the answers, like the Apollo space project in about 1967 in relation to the moon, is quite wrong. It's not just wrong as a matter of fact about where we are, it's also wrong conceptually about the relationship between human understanding and anything else. It always is a characteristic when we look back that we see what people got wrong.
But look how
this is being denied.
Look how far we've come in 300 years. Compare that with how far you collectively, the religious side of things, have come in 3,000 years. We're not taking hasty steps towards understanding. We're taking careful, reasoned, publicly accessible steps. And every step is accessible to the human brain. Every step promises to give understanding and comprehension to people, whereas you've admitted yourself a few moments ago that there will be no understanding. Whereas we, the humans who respect humanity, believe that we will achieve understanding.
No, of course I don't think there will be no understanding. What I think is that one of the things we need to understand is that we don't understand very much, and that this is not something that can be wholly remedied. It's in the nature of our condition.
What a pessimistic view.
No, it's not a pessimistic view, because there's almost infinite opportunity to understand more. But another aspect of human understanding which I think is denied by this project is the possibility that things can be lost as well as gained. And if you think in the moral life, for example, of a society, it's unquestionably the case that as some concepts rise and get a better understanding, others decline. For example, I think the idea of honour and trust in modern society, to take a couple of examples, are weaker than they were.
On the contrary, and our understanding of them is greater. And our understanding of the roots of morality are greater. And I think it's more important that we understand morality in a rational way than refer to books written 2,000 years ago.
Well, any philosopher worth his salt would wish to refer to books written 2,000 years ago.
I want to come back to Peter Atkins.
The fact that a book is written 2,000 years ago is barely criticism of it. And if it is, why do you make it think that this won't apply to us in 2,000 years?
Well, what should be the place of religion and faith in public life, Charles?
Well, of course, a lot of this argument is about this. And in this respect, I'm not completely unsympathetic to the atheist movement, because there can be no doubt that organised religion has perverted itself on many occasions in order to exercise illegitimate power in public life. However, when the atheists say that religion should be merely a matter of the private sphere, they're asking the impossible of a religious person, because Christianity and Islam in particular, and in a different way Judaism, demand the adherence of the whole person, and it therefore affects how one approaches everything. And of course, the public sphere is, in that respect, the same as the private.
Where does that leave you on something like teaching of creationism in American schools? I mean, that major debate was much more in the States than here, but then the whole person's religious view is then imposed on other people.
To some extent, anything taught to anybody is a view imposed on others. My general answer to that question is that I'm against a uniform teaching of anything throughout a school system. I'm against a school system, but that's really a political point. It seems to me that if people wish to teach rubbish and people wish to send their children to schools that teach rubbish, that's a matter for them.
You should protect the children from rubbish.
Well, you should, but of course it's very disputable what's rubbish.
No, it's not.
And it is. We're disputing it.
No.
And
You certainly are.
No, but creationism and intelligent design are rubbish.
No, I'm not. Sorry, forgive me. I'm not defending creationism and
but you think
intelligent design. As far as I know about them, they are
rubbish.
Therefore, in my view, morally should not be taught. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they should not be taught by law. For example, I disbelieve, probably just as strongly as you, many of the claims made by Islam about what happened with the Prophet Muhammad and so on. I don't think it's therefore wrong in the sense of a matter for politics or the law that there should not be Muslim schools.
So you would have I want to come back to Peter on this, because in a way creationism in the United States is a bit of an easy target. Yeah. What about any teaching of religion? Is that to you such a fundamental role?
It's very important to teach about religion. I'm not sure that you should try to teach religion itself, though. I think it's very important for our cultural background to know the roots of Shakespeare, the roots of great opera and so on. And so I think it's very important just for a cultural activity.
But you teach it as a fairy tale.
But you teach it as a fairy tale, and through promorphic delight, really.
But if you are a religious person, it's obviously essential that a child understands the tenets of the faith. Richard Dawkins gets in a great rage about this because he always seems to think that this is some form of brainwashing. Well, any form of moral or intellectual teaching given to a child exerts the authority of the teacher or the parent over the child in some sense. And a sensible Christian would not wish to deny the child's right to arrive at its own views, but a Christian would think that it was appropriate to bring up the child in the faith, because the faith is the whole of life. It's not only a matter of a series of propositions to which an adult gives assent, though it is that among other things.
But people should be shown that different faiths have different tenets.
Yes, yes.
And one should not simply impose one particular set of tenets on children.
As we arrived at Richard Dawkins, he says faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate evidence. But Peter, why should atheists have the right to suggest that reason is theirs alone?
Because what we talk about is evidence-based. It's publicly accessible knowledge. It's publicly acquired knowledge. It's not sentimental introspection, which is at the root of a great deal of religious understanding. We believe that we can demonstrate everything that we assert, whereas someone of a religious disposition cannot demonstrate anything.
But Charles, in this claim to rationality,
this is a point of view, but in my view, it's a very limited one. It's just such an inadequate account of so many thinkers in history to suggest that somehow that they're not reasoning. Well, even in modern history, one of the extraordinary things about atheism in the current form it's taking is this self-description of themselves as the brights. Magnificently arrogant a word to use about oneself. I'm sure lots of them are quite brilliant people, but so are lots of people who are believers. And one of the interesting and I think moving and important things about religion is that it has a unique capacity to bring important and deep truth to most of us, to most of us who are not bright. You know, Peter Atkins very bright, but you and me, well, sorry, not you, Anne, but most of us are not terribly bright. And but that doesn't mean that mustn't mean we don't have the rights of access to deep truth. And religion brings that in a way that
Peter, to talk about the brights.
Absolutely, I think it's dreadful. It's so arrogant, and we atheists don't want to be thought of as arrogant.
What have you got to learn from each other, Charles?
This argument has been going on for a very, very long time now, and I fear it hasn't developed. In fact, I fear
increasing cogency.
I fear it's regressed.
Increasing cogency.
So many intelligent scientists don't begin to take this view, and they don't see an automatic opposition between science and religion. And I'm sorry it's got to this sort of rather boring point.
Well, of course, this boring point is where someone of a religious disposition is on the back foot and accusing the scientists of failing.
So you think this is a fight and you're winning, Peter?
Absolutely. Give us time.
You're sure you're winning? Charles, who's winning?
Give us eternity. We're winning.
I'll see you there.
Tune in on the Day of Judgment.